Okay, Pashas Kitisa. This week we're talking about Pashas Kitisa, the African coin that was brought to the temple in order to donate for the communal sacrifices that was brought to the temple from the Jewish people. So the background of this mitzvah is that every Jew, every one who is over the age of 20, whether wealthy or poor, has to give half a coin to the priest every year, and they would put it in one place in the chamber, in one of the chambers in the Holy Temple. And when they needed money for the communal sacrifice, so we had this bunch of communal sacrifices. One of them was, every morning there were communal sacrifices that were brought into the temple. And there are other communal sacrifices, but the famous one is the one that was bought every morning and evening. So that's where they use the money to buy communal sacrifices. So when this mitzvah is explained and talked about, the chinuch, there's a book called the chinuch, and this is a book who explains all the mitzvot and the reasoning behind the mitzvot to the degree that can be explained, whatever can be explained. And when he talks about mitzvah, he says the source of this mitzvah, the idea behind this mitzvah, is that Hashem wanted to get every Jew to participate in the sacrifice, to have part in the sacrifice that was brought before Hashem all year, every day, whether wealthy or poor, and everyone should come and be reminded in front of God. And the laws of the mitzvah is that on the first day of the month of Adar, they were made an announcement that everybody has to give this contribution of the half a coin. And we're talking about a half a coin that was the coin of back then. Today, to commemorate this mitzvah, we give a half a coin of our country. So here we give a half a dollar. Usually they give a half a shekel, half of the current coin of that country. And so the laws of the mitzvah is that they were made the announcement that everybody had to give, and if somebody didn't have, had to borrow from others, or even would sell his clothes in order to participate in this contribution. And no one could give more, no one could give less. All you had to do is give exactly half a coin. Everybody was equal, and everybody has to give it. Priest, the Levi, Israel, everybody. And this mitzvah is during the time of the temple, of the Holy Temple, whether people who lived in Israel or people who live in the diaspora, and even now, when we don't have a Beis HaMikdash, we don't have the obligation to give it, even the people of Israel, but the customary is still, like we said, we give it to commemorate this mitzvah. It says that a person violated and does not give it is violating, during the time of the temple, is violating a positive mitzvah, and his punishment is very severe because he separated himself from the community. This was something that everybody had to participate and give. Now, today that we don't have the temple, again, it's still customary to give it, and we give it today on the fast of Esther, yesterday before Mincha, before the Mincha prayer, and we read this portion about the half a coin in the temple, in the shul, before Purim comes around, right before, 2 weeks before Purim, usually right around the month of Adar. It's the Shabbos. We read it right around Rosh Chodesh Adar, because that's the time when they made the announcement for this contribution, for this collection. It was announced during the month of Adar. And this mitzvah, rabbis tell us, it's a very precious mitzvah, and the Jewish people loved it because this was a mitzvah that included everybody, and nobody was different. Hashem treated everyone the same. Everybody gave just half, not more, not less. And also this gave an opportunity for everybody to be part of the communal sacrifice that was brought every day, right? Who doesn't want to be remembered in front of Hashem every day, morning and evening? So everybody wants to be part of that. And nobody's more important, less important. Nobody is richer or poorer in front of Hashem. Everybody is the same. And the concept of the Tamid sacrifice was a sacrifice that was brought for the Beis Hamikdash, and it was to atone for the sin of the Jewish people. So when we read this portion, we take out a second Torah, and first Torah we read the portion of the week, and the second Torah for the Maftir reading. First Torah we have 7 people that goes up, and for the Maftir reading we have for the 8th reading, the extra reading, we call up second Torah for this for this special mitzvah. So that's this week's portion. This week's portion, Parashat Kitisa, begins with this mitzvah. The Torah says, Hashem tells Moshe Rabbeinu, Kitisa rosh bnei Yisrael ifkudeyem. When you lift up, when you count is also the word Kitisa, count is also lifting up, because Jewish people have been lifted in front of Hashem with this mitzvah. It says when you want to take a census of the Jewish people, the way you do it is everyone should give a half a coin, and this half a coin is going to be an atonement. Atonement for what? An atonement for the sin of the golden calf. And it says in the Torah that by taking a census of the Jewish people through them giving a half a coin, there will be no plague amongst them. So meaning is Hashem told Moshe Rabbeinu, when you want to count the Jewish people, you want to take a census of the Jewish people, the way to do it is by them giving a half a coin. This half a coin is used for the sacrificial offerings. This half a coin is used as an atonement for the sin of the golden calf. And this is something that also you are able to count the Jewish people through, take a sense of the Jewish people through everybody give a half a coin, then you count all the coins and you know how many people are there. And it says in the Torah that everybody, this is to take a census of everybody who is 20 and up, every male who is 20 and up, because this was the people who were able to be part of the Jewish army and attend the army. And this is that's everybody who was part in that census. And it says that this is Hashem tells Moshe, when you take this amount of money from the Jewish people as an atonement for their soul, and this will be the way that I'll remember them. This will be an atonement for their soul. Also through this way, I'll remember the Jewish people. So this section, this parsha that we read this week was told to Moshe Rabbeinu when he was commended on building the sanctuary. We just read Parashat Truma, Parashat Tzaveh. We read all the details of the building of the sanctuary and everything that is needed. We read what is needed, how you make each one of these vessels and the clothing of the priests and everything. And there was a lot of things that was needed, all the material that was needed for everything in the sanctuary. So when Hashem commends the Moshe Rabbeinu about this, everything that is needed from the sanctuary, all the materials, he also tell them, you want to count them, you count them with a half a coin, and this would be used for the sacrificial offering. And Moshe Rabbeinu is right away putting into action, and right away he tells the Jewish people, everyone should give everyone who is the age of 21 and up should give half a shekel. And this is what we're going to use. We're going to use this money, this particular contribution, we're going to be used to for the socket. To use that contribution, it was 3 half a coin that were brought at 3 different times. One was used as a sacrificial offering, and this one that Moshe used for the census was used for the sockets, to the money, to have the silver that is needed, because it was a silver coin, and it was used to build, to have the sockets of the material needed, the silver needed for the sockets of the sanctuary. And then a few months later, when the sanctuary was actually built, Moshe Rabbi did another census and threw another half a coin, and that's what he used for the sacrificial offering. Now, there is an interesting phenomena that when it comes to count the Jewish people, that we know that we don't count Jews. It says you're not allowed to count Jews because count can bring a plague. So you have to count people. You don't count them by number. Like if you in shul or we count people per minyan, you don't say 1, 2, 3, 4. You say not 1, not 2, or you use a passage that has 10 verses, 10 words in the passage in order to count the Jewish people. And this is going back to this portion where Hashem tells Moshe Rabbeinu, if you want to take account of the Jewish people, if you want to count how many Jews there are, don't count them by numbers. The way to count them is for them to give half a coin. If you don't want to have a plague amongst them, you need to give them a half a coin, and you count the half a coins. You don't count them to eliminate a plague, to avoid a plague amongst them. So it's interesting, we find 2 other times that the Jewish people were counted and were not counted through a number. It was by King David and by King Saul. Let's take a look at both. So in Tractate Brachot in the Talmud, it talks about King David, and it says that King David, when Saul was running after them to kill them, at one point he was able to grab Saul's spear. He was hiding, and Saul went and slept. And King Saul was asleep, he went and he took the water that he had, and he took the spear that he had. And then he went to climb on the top of the mountain. And from there, he had a conversation with Saul. And he told Saul, he says to King Saul, he said, why are you fighting against me? Why are you trying to get me? Why are you pursuing me? And he told them, if the reason why you're going after me and trying to get me and trying to kill me is because Hashem enticed you against me, I'll pray to Hashem that Hashem should, give you another mind, give you another spirit, that you're going to forget about it and not come after me. And because he was using the language that if God enticed you against me, he was using inappropriate language, referring to Hashem. Hashem said, oh, you use this language, inappropriate language, saying, I enticed Saul against you, so I will cause you to fail, I'll cause you to sin in something, and I will entice you to do something that is not good, and as a result of that, there will be a big consequence, big punishment for the Jewish people. So what did he entice them? It says King David told his general Yoav, general of the army, go count the Jewish people. Go count how many soldiers there are. And Yoav told the king, why do you want it? What's the reason? Like, well, he was trying to get him to stop him from doing it. He says, why do you need to count the soldiers? What reason? But King David says, no, I want to count them. So the general of the army, Yoav, has no choice. And he goes out and he counts them, and he comes back and he tells them there are 800,000 and 500 people, 500 soldiers in the army. And because he counted them, the punishment came, and the Jewish people, there were 70,000 Jewish people that died as a result, because you're not allowed to count them. If you count them, there's a plague that comes upon them. So because he counted them, plague came and 70,000 Jewish people was killed until David prayed to Hashem. And he says to God, he said, if I sin, what did these people do? Why are you killing these people? Please come after me and after my father's house. And the prophet came and told them the way to stop the plague is by building an altar and in Mount Moriah, in the place where the Beis Hamikdash, where the temple was going to be built. So we see that you're not supposed to count the Jewish people. If you count them, it could bring a plague amongst them. Now, there is a difference, our rabbis tell us, between what purpose are you counting them for? Meaning, the Talmud, in a different tractate, in Tractate Yoma, the Talmud says you're not allowed to count the Jewish people even for a mitzvah, right? You want to know how many Jewish people are there in the shul, whether you have a million or not. You're not allowed to count them. You're not supposed to count them. And the Talmud brings from a place, the Talmud brings to a reference to King Saul, who counted the Jewish people, and he didn't count them through a number. He counted them through telling them, pick up a piece of clay, everybody, and then we'll count the clays, and we'll see how many people there are. And the question is, when the Talmud talks about not counting the Jewish people, the Talmud says that you cannot count the Jewish people and refers you to an example, to the story of King Saul, who counted the Jewish people, and he counted them through not through a number, but through them picking up a piece of clay. And the question is, why did the Talmud sends you to King Saul? Why didn't the Talmud refer you to the Torah, to the written Torah, to our parsha, where God told Moshe, don't count them, because if you count them, there'll be a plague among them. Why do we have to take a reference to a story from King Saul when we could go to the source of the Torah, where the Torah says, you're not allowed to count the Jewish people. If you count them, there'll be a plague among them. So why do we need to go to the story of King Saul? So Rabbi explains that there is a difference between the counts. Rabbi says that when we're talking about the count of King Saul, I mean, when the Tractate Yoma, that talk about that you're not allowed to count the Jewish people, there it talks about even when it comes to a mitzvah. Meaning, even if you want to count people in shul to know whether you have a million, you're not allowed to count them. So even for the sake of a mitzvah, you're not allowed to count them. And he sent you to the count that King Saul, to the census that King Saul did, because back then it was for a purpose of a mitzvah. Because King Saul had to go out to a war, and he needed to know how many soldiers there was. So there was a mitzvah to go to a war. So in order to do this mitzvah, he needed to know, in order to go to the war, he needs to know how many soldiers there are. And that's why he took a census of the Jewish people. So when the Talmud in Tractate Yoma talks about the census, it says you're not allowed to count the Jewish people, it talks about a mitzvah. And it cannot send you to our portion of the week when God told Moshe Rabbeinu, don't count the Jewish people, because this week our parsha doesn't talk about the mitzvah. Our parsha says, and if you look at the Rashi on the first passage of this week's portion, the parsha said that Hashem tells Moshe Rabbeinu, when you desire to know the number of the Jewish people and you want to do it, this is how you do it. Meaning it's not a mitzvah. There's no need to know how many they are. There was no reason to know. God didn't command and says, oh, go take a census of the Jewish people. That says when you desire to know the Jewish people, you should do that not through a number. Don't count them, but do it through them giving a half a coin and count the half a coins. So there was not a mitzvah. But here the Talmud talks about a mitzvah. When you need to know how many Jews there are you allowed to count them or not? I want to know, are you allowed to count Jews when it comes to a mitzvah? I can know from the Torah because the Torah talks about when it's not a mitzvah. It's just, you want to know, Moshe want to know the number of the Jewish people. So I know when it comes to something which is not a mitzvah, you're not allowed to count the Jewish people. You have to do it through them giving a half a coin. But what happens when it comes to a mitzvah? It comes to a need. They need to know their number. Am I allowed to count them then or not? Like when King Saul have to send the soldiers to the army, he needs to know how many there are. In that case, am I allowed to count the Jewish people? Is there a problem counting the Jewish people when it comes to a mitzvah? And that's why the Talmud sent you to the example of King Saul, because there was a mitzvah. He needed to know how many soldiers there were to fight the war, and still, he didn't use numbers. He uses them taking a piece of clay and through them, or another place where each one took a sheep and he counted the sheep. So point is that you're not allowed to count the Jewish people regardless. When you want to count Jews, even if it's for the fact of a mitzvah, you're not allowed to count them. You have to use, anytime you're trying to count Jews, you have to do it through what we use today when it comes to know how many people there's a minyan. We use the passage that has 10 words. The passage we use is Oshia et amecha uvarech et nachalatecha urem unasem ad olam. So you have 10 words. Oshia et amecha uvarech et nachalatecha urem unasem ad olam. Or some people do not one, not two, not three, but typically that's a passage we use to know how many people we have if we need to have a minyan. There's another passage that has 10 words in them, and this passage has to do with going to shul. The passage is and this is another passage. It goes, "Va'ani berov." It's a passage from the morning prayer. It goes, "Va'ani berov chasdecha avo v'techa ishtachave elecha kodshecha be'iratecha." This is a passage that talk about going to shul. Avo v'techa, I'm coming to shul. And the Rabbi says that they used to use this passage because it has to do with gathering in shul to daven. But the Rabbi says now we're using a different passage. We're using a passage that's connected with Mashiach. As we get closer to Mashiach, we're using a passage that talks about how Hashem, or Shia et Amecha, Hashem will bring the salvation to the Jewish people. Varech et Nechalatecha will bless the Jewish people and will bring Mashiach. Because when we are gathering, when 10 men gather in shul to daven, you need to have a presence of 10, because of the presence of 10, you have the Shekhinah. So if you have no presence of 10, you still daven, but you can read from the Torah, you can say Kaddish, certain things you could only do when you have a quorum, you have a presence of 10 men, and that's when you have the resting of the Shekhinah. You have 10, the Shekhinah rests, the divine presence rests, the presence of 10, and that's when we are able to say Kaddish and read the Torah. So the Rabbi says when Jewish people gather together and they have the presence of Shekhinah, what is the first thing they do? The first thing is they pray for the coming of Mashiach, because we are in a deep exile and this is very much needed. So we have to remember that, especially in this time that we are now with the war in Iran and everything that is going on in the world now, we see how the world is preparing himself for Mashiach, with getting rid of more and more evil in the world, more dictators in the world. And one of the things that's going to happen, Mashiach will come, there'll be no more evil in the world. So people ask, how it's going to be? Like, it's going to be like suddenly a big magic and evil will disappear. But we see how the world is preparing itself to it by getting rid of this dictatorship in the world. You have less evil in the world. There's less and less evil, and we see that the world itself, within the nature of the world, is preparing himself for the coming of Mashiach. So let us, what we could do, is Shushan Purim. The Rabbi points out that especially when we see things that happen in the world, crazy things that happen in the world, the best way to react to them with an extra light, with extra joy, with even more joy, because being sad won't help. And when we are joyous and trust in Hashem and another mitzvah, that's the best thing we can do to help Jewish people in Israel, Jewish people all over the world, and merit the coming of Mashiach. So let us continue to pray every day and do a special mitzvah, increase more and more light, especially in light of the events that are going on. If we want to do something about it, what we could do is increase in light, do another mitzvah, add another prayer, read another chapter of Psalms, study a little bit more Torah, and ask Hashem to send Mashiach.
Thank you, Rabbi.
You're very welcome. Good to see you all.
Good to see you.